Okay, so the three basic kinds of printmaking that we do in this class are relief printing, intaglio or etching, and then screen printing. So relief printing is the most basic and simple thing. If you've ever made a stamp in grade school or anything like that, you've done some form of relief printing. And basically relief printing is if I have a block of wood, let's say like this, and I go in there and I gouge out from the surface. So I basically drop the surface down, so I have these little kind of plateaus and valleys in the surface of the plate. So I've gouged this away. So I have high and low spots on a piece of metal or even a piece of wood or a piece of linoleum, whatever you choose to do. And then I have a roller with ink on it, and I roll the ink roller over the top, and it distributes this ink everywhere that's high, right? Because the roller's not going to go down into the low spots, it's going to stay up above. So then I have these little high areas that'll hold ink, and when I take a piece of paper and I impress it down on top, I end up with a reversed image of what I have carved into the plate. So relief is the most basic, simple way of creating a matrix, so matrix-based printmaking, or matrix-based art making, I'm sorry. But basically it's the simplest way to make a matrix of any kind would just be to do a relief print. So you just take a piece of wood or something and you gouge it away, and then you run ink over the surface and stamp it onto a piece of paper. That's the most basic form of printmaking, probably one of the earliest forms of printmaking that human beings came up with. So that's relief. Etching basically is a bunch of incised little nicks and divots and things like that in your piece of metal. And then what we do is we rub the ink all over the surface of this plate, all over the whole thing. So we end up with a, ink all over the whole thing. And then we use a special tool called a tarlatan, and we very carefully wipe the ink off the surface of the plate. And that basically just leaves the ink down in the low spots. So now, when I run that through a press under high pressure, the paper is embossed down and pressed down, and it pulls that ink up, and it becomes its reverse, and basically offsets that ink off of the plate onto the piece of paper. The last technique we're going to learn about is called serigraphy or screen printing. And screen printing is basically a stencil process, which means that if I'm looking at a piece of, some kind of, they started off on silk, but now we do it on kind of monofilament and stuff like that. Basically, I've created areas in my screen that are a hole. So I've blocked out areas all around here that won't let ink through them. And then I've opened up areas, so opened up little holes in the stencil where the ink can get through. And then I take a squeegee and some ink, and I put the ink down here, and I with a lot of pressure, just squish that ink through those open holes, and the ink basically travels through the screen. It's blocked in all the places where I have blocked out. It only goes through the little holes that have been cut in the screen, and it's offset onto the piece of paper that way. So the thing to know is both of these techniques, so relief and intaglio, reverse your image. So if you want to have some awesome text in your piece, like, "Hey mom, you're the greatest," and you write it out, frontwards with an etching, it's going to print backwards when you go to print it. So you want to learn how to write in reverse if you really want the "Hi mom" text in your piece. Screen printing, it doesn't reverse it. What you see looking straight on is what you get when you burn that onto the screen. So just kind of a for your information moment, and everybody ends up forgetting to write something backwards, and they end up with reverse text, and then you have to be sort of slick about it and pretend like, "Oh dude, I totally meant to do that. That was just, part of my postmodern statement about the world." Or you have to think up something like that, but most of the time everybody knows it's just a rookie mistake. So remember to reverse your text or your image if you want to make sure a guy's pointing this way. When you put it on your etching plate, you guys got to be pointing that way, because it's going to get printed and flipped around.